Welcome to another sizzling episode of Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
We're so glad to have you here with us on this Wednesday talking about hedonic treadmill.
Yes, this is a
Oh,
very interesting topic.
I know. And it's not like New Year's. You know how New Year's, there's always the resolutions. I'm going to work out and be healthier. We're not talking about that type of treadmill.
That's so funny. I hadn't thought about that.
Nerd alert, nerd
Okay.
alert.
I know, right?
I'm taking it. So
That's awesome. We'll talk about something that is a lot more, maybe we would say internal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, it's so funny because even as we were talking about getting ready for this show, like I had all these moments where I see these situations or times in my life where this hedonic treadmill was certainly at play.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the term hedonic treadmill. It was
Yes.
just this, like I could see what was happening, and sometimes they were big cycles and sometimes short cycles.
Yes. You're right. It's like these times, and I'm sure as we explain more, our audience is even going to start thinking about like, oh yes, I've definitely been in that mood, right? Either right now or in the past. And we know we probably are going to be in that mood in the future, right?
Absolutely.
It's almost like a part of human nature. But today we're talking about how do you recognize it, right? So you can escape from that, from the cycle.
Right, because awareness, when we increase our awareness, that's the first step.
Yeah.
Then we have the ability to then make choices on what do we do after we have that awareness.
Yes. So I'm curious, in the comments, please say hello and where you are watching from or listening from. And then we want to know, have you ever heard of the hedonic treadmill?
Yeah. Who have you experienced it? Is the term something you're familiar with? Are you like never heard of it? And if you're joining us on replay, hashtag replay, if you can insert that in the comment and share with us as well. That way it tags us so that we can connect with you and continue the conversation.
Yes. When we brought this up, actually, Jill, you brought this up as a topic, because it's one of those things that's, like you said, end of year. It's one of those things that just comes top of mind. And when I first heard it, I'm like, what is that? But once we started talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I've definitely heard of it. Definitely have experienced it. And thought it would be a great topic for our audience, because just being in food safety, right? Like we come to those times that it's like we are quite unhappy, or we're fighting for resources, or we have the weight of our organization on our shoulders. If we're not careful, we could experience this often.
Yeah. And a couple episodes ago, we talked about the leadership paradox.
Mm-hmm.
And that was more from this angle of, as leaders, we still have work to do, right? For our own awareness and understanding where things are at and what people really need. So we're solving the right needs or meeting the needs of people. But this also ties into that, because one of the other things that I've heard organizations or people say is, well, gosh, we already did that for them. What do they want more now?
Yeah.
Well, that's part of this hedonic treadmill that is, as humans, we are wired to be on.
Yes.
Yeah.
So before we dive deeper, because we're going to talk about what it is, how does it impact you maybe and your teams, and what to do about it, we just wanted to say hello. If you are the first time joining us, I'm Tia, this is Jill, and we are the co-founders of Catalyst. And what we do at Catalyst is we really focus on transforming the way people lead in food. And we focus on that because when people feel empowered to live authentically, they do achieve more, right? And we see it. We see it in the results, that because of this achievement and this productivity, when people have the tools and the competencies to lead, then we see this amazing business growth and profitability in organization, and highly effective teams that's working well together so that you can get more done. And so at Catalyst, that's what we do. We're certified coaches and we have the background in food safety and quality. And we take all this knowledge, right, and partner with organizations so that they can really transform the way their people are leading.
Yes. And, my plug, since we're kind of at the end of the year as well, is a lot of people are putting development plans in for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when we think about succession planning and helping prepare people for their next role or what they're going to do, or bench strength by golly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about preparing people and not just technical.
Yeah.
Like I can have the best HACCP plan, the best food defense plan, but if I can't stand in my leadership role and take care of my team and others, that stuff, we've all seen it. It collects dust on the shelf.
Right.
It's firefighting. It is the call at 2 a.m. So
yeah. It's one of the things that we see people, organizations kind of skip over is the people. We talk about food safety culture, right? Many people just focus on the food safety technical knowledge, right? How's our HACCP plans? Are we closing those gaps? And that's extremely important. But if you do not focus on the culture, aka the people, right? Food safety culture is not going to move forward. You would just have all these people with technical skills with no skills to lead, right? To help empower their staff, to have the competencies to build relationships, influence, safe spaces, all of those things we love to talk about at Catalyst.
Yeah. And this is kind of a sidetrack here, but I was just on the phone with someone and they were talking about kind of these generational differences that, there's this group of people that were helping pave the way when it came to some of the science that goes into what we do today and the technology and really like establishing risk assessments. And right, that was like 80s, 90s, the early 2000s. Right. Those people were getting ready to retire.
Yes.
And, part of it is they don't realize the people that are like taking over, they're like, you already created this stuff. Like we've been living in that. And so now they're really craving leadership and collaboration. And it's this different skill set. And so if we think about culture and meeting the needs of people, it just really was this light bulb. And I know that's not our whole topic today, but it's a little bit about this wanting more. Because there's always those questions. Well, why do people want more? Why do they want more?
Yes.
So it really leads into how our needs are different for each person, but even organizationally.
Yeah. And that's important because like you said, like there are people retiring and moving out, and most likely you listening to us probably have experienced that, right? You've lost your tenured people, or you have a turnover because of, we were just talking to someone about a bunch of turnover happening at the organization because of COVID. These shifts are happening. And so making sure that you are aware, number one, of the shift and being in tune with the people, the new people even coming in, and making sure that they have the right skills, right, to continue to advance the organization and to to get the business growth and to help them, right, be successful as people in the organization. It's important to focus on them.
Yeah. And, this hedonic treadmill, right? This is the classic, like, gosh, somebody just got a bonus. Why aren't they happy now? Or gosh, we just sent them to a workshop. Why aren't they happy with their development?
Yeah.
Or maybe, wow, we got a new coat, or wow, I got a new phone. Like that wears off.
It does.
It does.
It's something that even as you are looking for your next job, or oh, if I can just get that promotion, right? Or if I can just make a little bit more money. Just a little bit more money, I'll be happier. I'll be happier in life. Or if I buy the new iPhone, right? Or get the coolest little watch. My husband's looking at watches right now. So look at the most high-tech
gadget, right?
Yeah. Like if I get it, then I'll be happy. I'll be able to do more. I'll be able to, right? Like if I get this, I'll be able to do more. I'll be able to be happier. I won't be, as constrained and, right?
But the part is we all know we get the thing and we come back down to we want more. Yeah. And we kind of keep going through this. And part of that is called the hedonic adaptation. And I think you preface part of why we're talking about it today is whether it's holidays, this is a time of giving and getting. It's when people are wishing for things or what's to come in 2024. It's also a time where people tend to extend gratitude for what they have.
Yeah.
And so it's a perfect time to talk about this hedonic adaptation because all of that is part of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and part of it too is because when we do sit in this place of longing, right, when we're always wanting more, 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 do we even create space for us to appreciate what we have?
Mm.
And kind of the philosophical question of, will we ever find contentment?
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting because really this whole concept of the hedonic treadmill, it's if we get into this state of wanting without appreciating what we have, right, and acknowledging, right, what we have, how far we've come, however you want to look at it, then we do get into this cycle of always wanting, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but like this is based on science, right, on how humans adapt and respond to wants.
It is. And as a leader, if I'm looking at how do I be a great leader, not just a good leader, I also need to understand this concept because this is something that my team experiences, that I experience, that people around me are going to experience.
Yes.
And so that's why we want to talk about why it shows up, where it shows up, and most importantly, like what are some things you can do to, I'm going to say overcome, but perhaps it's extending the cycle so it doesn't happen as often, or it's creating moments where you can sit in more contentment than others.
Yeah. And it's about that awareness of it, right? And so we're hoping that you get a little bit of awareness of where am I, where am I in the process? And really great point around even your teams, right? Like if you experience it as a leader, your teams experience it. How do you help? How do you help there?
Yeah. I remember so many times where we'd be like planning for the next year and we're working on goals that are similar to things we did last year. We're like, gosh, didn't we do this last year? Didn't we move ahead at all? Right. And part of it is the hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
Yep, we improved sanitation last year, but we still want more. Yep, we improved how we are, backfilling positions, but we still want more.
Yeah.
Yep, we improved culture a little bit, but we still want more.
Yes.
And I thought it was fascinating when I did a little bit of research on hedonic treadmill. It said that our brains are literally wired to want more because one of our core instincts is seeking. Like we're often seeking, like in nature, to find things, whether it's threats, whether it's food, seeking. And so this seeking or wanting creates this situation of kind of almost this continuous dissatisfaction. And instead of perhaps the pleasure in seeking, and we want to talk more about the pleasure in seeking that to be aware of.
Right. That's really interesting. I think that's really interesting science to say that, we're always wanting, right, and are seeking for what we need or want. So like if we talked about this right before we got on like buying things, putting things in our cart, right? We all have our Amazon carts, our Amazon wish list out there. But it's like now when Theo says like, why are you buying all this stuff from Amazon? I can just be like, well, I'm wired for seeking.
Hedonic adaptation.
Right.
Which one of the definitions from this group, Sheldon and Lucas, really is that if we are exposed to the same stimuli over time, the quality of our experience and our response to those stimuli change. Right? Seems pretty straightforward. I think logically we'd all be like, yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The part that I found really interesting is it happens not only for positive things that we would classify or assign as positive, but also negative.
Yeah. Some of the research that I saw, or some examples that I saw around this, is like how your body responds to like being in a war zone. So if you grew up in a war zone,
Mm.
your mind actually adapts to being in that dangerous environment. So you're not overly depressed or overly stressed about your environment
Mm.
versus someone that's not, that doesn't have that stimuli all the time. And so it's actually it's a mechanism that our body does, that if there's this exposure over time, and obviously that's a negative example, right? Your body almost regulates itself.
Mm-hmm.
That over time, it's not the same type of response that your body is getting.
Which is really plays into part of like why it shows up or why we do it. That falls into kind of this cognitive adaptation. Like our brains actually adjust our expectations to align with like what are my current circumstances.
Yeah.
So whether it's a war zone or right, we're in food, we've all been in shitty jobs or less than desirable perhaps roles.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I either can fight it and spend energy doing that every day, or I might have to adjust my expectations.
Yeah.
So that I can survive and be here.
Right. That's really interesting, Jill, because it's one of those things of being in a culture that there's so much work to do. And there's cultures, right, that there's so much work to do. Mm-hmm. But when you can adjust your mindset to really focus on, okay, where are we today? Right. And we're, of course, we're going to dive into this a little more, but like you said, adjusting that expectation on where we are today, where we've been, right? And then what are we going to get done in this next short period of time? And then again, pausing, what did we do? Did it work well? Like, what are we going to focus on next? But it's like, if you're in this mindset of, this is terrible, right? This is terrible. You're here and, oh man, we haven't done anything, right? And we have so much to go. Then your brain is responding to that.
Well, so curious you bring that up, because even if we're in the, like, this is terrible, like, let's say there is improvement. So let's say there's some effort to make culture better or a role better. And you're like, I see a glimmer. Well, if our baseline is here, guess what? We're coming back around the cycle unless we intentionally shift.
That's why culture change is hard, right? Like, that's why it's hard and it takes a while, is because everyone is in this cycle. Mm-hmm. And even if you do something great, like the example we talk about all the time is, we gave out these awards because people want to be rewarded more. And you give out rewards and then people still feel the same as their baseline. And you're like, well, we recognize people, right? But in reality, people are on this path.
They have a moment of, yay, I got the award, and then it comes back down.
It comes back down. So you have to keep working at it, right? Mm-hmm. So you can keep moving forward. That's fascinating to think about.
It is. And so, for example, right, there's all this, well, let's just do food safety culture training. Okay, so we train and people are like, yeah, we're going to make some change. But guess what? Without proper follow-up action, because we just trained, it comes down.
Yes.
Same thing happens with hand washing, with corrective action training, with root cause analysis training. We all get excited. But we have to really think about, after that, what are the next things?
Yes.
Without the shiny distractions that like pull us away.
Right. That's really interesting. It's an interesting and a different way to explain what we see with culture, right? And food safety culture and these actions that people are trying to take. But because we have our own workloads, right? And we have other things kind of going on in the space, we don't take into account this cycle of coming back down to baseline. It's one of the reasons why Catalyst exists. So we can partner with organizations to help them keep moving forward, even as they grow their organization, even while they, launch 100 different products this year, like having that partner to make sure that you don't go back down to where your baseline was is so important if you want to see the sustainable culture change.
Yeah. And really it's all like hormones and chemicals, right? It's the dopamine wears off and things return back to a normal state.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it happens cognitively.
Mm-hmm.
But hedonic treadmill is really interesting because it also has social comparison theory. I called it keeping up with the Joneses.
Yes.
right? Where we keep going on this cycle because we think somebody else has something that's better or more than what we have.
Oh, yeah. Yes. The grass is greener on the other side, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Or, it's one of the things that, like, as you think about the internet, the internet being here, right? It made the world so much smaller. And then with social media, the world has gotten even smaller. So because we can see what's happening all over the world, right, in different lifestyles, that whole comparison piece, and that's in almost every conversation around social media, right? Like that's there. And I'm sure we see even more of an impact with this social comparison theory because now we do have the internet and social media.
We do. And granted, when we shift it to work for good, part of what we do here is bring on guests who can share their more success stories or motivational or inspirational stories, because especially as we talk about food safety culture or developing leaders, right? When we see, gosh, they did that, they're able to do that. That's part of the good side of the social comparison theory.
Yeah.
Where we go, gosh, can we recalibrate to what our expectations can be or should be?
Yeah. Yeah. Really good point. We talk about that a lot when we have conversations around diversity and making sure your leaders look like the people on the floor, right? And look like the people that you're serving, even. Because for people to be able to see, ooh, there are people that look like me. There are people with backgrounds like me in leadership roles. I too can be in that space. I was just having a conversation with someone. I can't remember exactly who it was, but they were talking about bringing on a diverse group of people for their students. And it's one of those things that, he had talked about. Now I remember, he had talked about, his students were like, I don't know a woman in this space. And I'm a woman that's trying to be in this space. So it's like knowing other women in this space helps you. Again, it's like, it's what's happening in your brain. It helps connect those dots to say, yes, I can do that.
Right. And that repeat it, because if we are on our hedonic treadmill, if we're on our baseline and we see and experience this, it helps us go, wow, right. Dopamine is triggering and like, I can do that. And I have this experience and this memory of it. So how do we keep repeating that? So the baseline, of course, we want to increase or even shift so that we start a new one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Which kind of goes into this last one called peak end rule, which is, once again, as we were researching, I was like, wow, I totally experienced this. But this is where we tend to remember and evaluate experiences based on our most intense point and the final moments rather than considering the overall duration of the experience. And as we're coming to year end, this is the classic annual review.
Yes.
Right? Where it's at the end of the year and people are like, well, in the past month, here are the things you've done well and the things you could do better. And you're like, what about all this?
Yes. It's one of the things, like when something happens, right? And it happens, like negative happens, and it's at the end of the year, you're like, oh, it's going to be on your end of year review, right? Versus like if it happens in January, is someone going to remember? It's like one of those things. And one of the reasons why you need to track your results over the year, right?
Yeah.
Because people do, like, they're looking at the most intense, and then like what's happening towards the end. And again, it's no one's like fault, or no one's not, your boss is not out to get you, right? You as a leader, you're not out to get your people. It's just the way that our minds register information.
It is. And I think it even applies when we think about, right, we've all been to a workshop or heard a speaker, maybe you're at Real Talk and you're like, yay. Like you may have this real moment where you have this intense, perhaps even emotional connection, or where it resonates and you're like, that's what I want to take away.
Yeah.
Like, how do you carry that forward so that once again, your baseline hopefully comes up a little bit, so that that's something I can experience more often than this one time and then cycle back down.
Yes. It's one of the reasons that we talk about all the time on like, what is your one action you're going to take?
Yeah.
Because to think about that, or to think about your takeaway from something, we talk about it all the time here. Like, your takeaways from conversations. Because if you don't do something afterwards, right, you're going right back down the baseline. It's one of the reasons why, if you joined our webinar with Tag and we talked about food safety culture and almost like what happens after assessments, right? Which is where we play in as catalysts. But if you're taking assessments or doing culture surveys and that's it, right? Like you're really not doing actions afterwards. You're just going back to baseline.
Yes. But I think this, once again, also applies because we all have team members. We're all people who we may have had a really tough, terrible, cruddy experience with someone or a situation. And of course, our mind, our brains, and even our body responds to that differently. But once again, intense points of emotion.
Yeah.
And so when we think about culture, or like, well, why can't they just come along? Why can't they just get over that? Why can't they just do this?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to, consider that people experience things completely different than we do. And that moment that's maybe holding them back is because it's rooted somewhere in this previous experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also something, Jill, something that I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation. It's even as leaders, right? Like as we step into roles and we might not have the leadership ability to do so. It's almost one of those, it makes me think about the saying, right? Like burn bridges, right? Or, you make a mistake as a leader and then now you know better. People remember the mistake that you made, right? People remember the way that you've talked to them or the way that you didn't prioritize their development. And so people remember this and then that's like tagged to you. So it takes even more work to change that perception because it's tied to this intense moment. And it's one of the reasons that we stress, right? Like helping your leaders get those skills before they even step into a role. So because we know once that baseline is there, it's hard to get out of it.
It is.
Will work.
It is. And, and our mind likes to play with us.
Yeah.
It's so incredible in how it protects us. So even the things we talked about, there's the factors that play into it, whether it's the intensity, the duration, the scale of how we adapt to wanting more, and even returning to that baseline. Some of the things that we talked about.
Yeah.
Those, even researchers talk about happiness, even set points. Like maybe we're like, I'm going to say held hostage by like our genes say we can only be this happy, or our factors tell us we can't really be happier because this is what we were born into. This is where we're working. This is what we experience without wanting more. And that's not true.
Yeah.
Right. Our happiness isn't this baseline that like we can't rise above it.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, reality, right? We're not always going to have days where we're like elated. We all know that. That's not the goal here.
Yeah.
But I do think it's really interesting and ask people to consider, like, what if you thought that your true nature was actually a state of joy and happiness?
Yeah.
How could life look different?
Yeah.
The reason we go through the cycle is because of some of the things up here.
Yeah. Right.
It doesn't mean that it's right, wrong, or bad, right? We all are going through the cycle.
Right. Yeah.
We all go through it.
Right. It's all about that awareness and knowing like when do you need to step outside of that cycle, or when do you need to focus on raising that baseline for your team or for yourself, right? And again, that takes action. Yeah. We talked a little bit about where does it show up. We've given some examples around culture and even in our personal life, but to narrow it down, like this can show up anywhere and everywhere, whether it's in your personal life, right? Or, one example that they called out many times as I was looking at this concept is winning the lottery, right? Like the happiness of someone that wins the lottery. If you ask someone how happy you're going to be, and I've been there. So like, if you know me, if you work with me, I've probably told you what I'm going to do when I win the $10 billion lottery. I do not play it often, right? And so it's like, you got to play to win. So I'm not going to win it. But But I'm like, oh, if I win this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Right. We're associating these things. But research actually shows that for people who actually win the lottery, their happiness, right, goes up. And then they find over a few short years that they're back to baseline. Wherever they were before they won the lottery, they are back to that baseline of happiness. And so this is again an extreme example, maybe for us, but again, it shows up everywhere. Even winning the lottery, right, can't get you out of this cycle.
No. And I think when I think about the hedonic treadmill, part of why it shows up and why it can be hard is because when I'm on it, when I recognize I'm on it, what I also recognize is that I have given over my power to be happy to something outside of me.
Yes.
So whether it's a person, whether it's a place, whether it's a job, whether it's a thing, whether it's right, like you said with the lottery, like, well, when I get that money,
right,
then my happiness comes versus right being here.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about happiness a few episodes ago with Susan and Decide Happy, and she had some great tips around it. But this is just another example of like your happiness doesn't live outside of you.
No.
Right. It can't, because someone can take it away. Right. Like it's thinking about that control, right? Like you have no control of these external forces. And so if your happiness is built on something that may or may not be there, right, then that's shaky ground.
Then you're on the treadmill and maybe even on an incline, maybe going faster than you want because you are like going through it.
Right. Yeah.
I think is really cool because I thinking about like how it shows up. One of the things is this constant complaining.
Yeah. Like if as a leader or as a person, maybe someone on your team, it's if you're complaining about others all the time or the company all the time on, maybe it's how it's impacting you or impacting your peers and impacting your team. And we can't do this and we can't do that. And, my tire is flat coming to work. And like, if you're constantly complaining about these things, you're probably stuck on the treadmill.
Yeah. And if the glass is always half empty.
Yeah.
And I know, so I've run into a few people who are like, I'm not negative, I'm just a realist.
Ooh.
And I just ask them to really think about how that serves them.
Yeah. And others, right?
Yes.
Like how is that serving you? How is that serving the people around you?
Yeah. And how is that, impacting your pace on this hedonic treadmill?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because in both situations, right, the glass half empty or the glass half full, there's room, right, for more. There's room for more. And in both situations, again, like we're seekers. We probably want more. But it's again, are you showing up with the complaints or are you showing up with the action steps and the need to move that baseline of where your water is, right, or where your culture is or where your team is?
Yeah, and I think we even started when we said, the hedonic treadmill probably gets kind of this negative connotation, but that's only to the point where being on it creates the dissatisfaction of seeking.
Yeah.
All right, when we're seeking experiences or whatever it is that lights you up, clearly that's part of mine. Right? That makes me happy.
Yeah.
Versus being stuck. And I think that goes to this other part, like how it shows up or why is because if you don't know what makes you happy, then how do you know where your treadmill is? Where is your treadmill?
Right. Exactly. We sometimes see this with
not just the classic. Sorry, I got to add in here my little caveat. Not just the classic, like my health, my family, my whatever, my friends.
Right. Yes.
We need another level of discernment, or 5 levels,
right?
What's filling your heart?
Yes. We ran into those people. We probably have been those people where we're like, is it the promotion? We get the promotion. That's not it. Is it, my kids make a play, they make the play, it's not there. Like we don't really know at this time, right? What actually makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy? What do you not want to be associated with? What do you not want to do that doesn't fulfill you, right? Again, that awareness of where are you? Where's your treadmill, and in what direction are you going? You can't shift your baseline if you don't know where you want to shift it to or how you want to shift it.
Yeah. Which I think ties in with I love this part of like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And I want to go to the values part
Yes.
because I
Yes.
think that plays into that. And I love this line that you put in here about making decisions not in line with your values.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We are unhappy when we value something and we decide opposite of that.
Yes.
But conversely, the hedonic treadmill is helpful for us when we make decisions that align with our values.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's like the happy dopamine just triggering.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's really interesting because like as I was looking at this and some of the reasons or how things are showing up, and we run into leaders, right, that don't make decisions based on their own values, and sometimes you wonder why. Like, why? I know this person, right? Or they haven't made decisions like this in the past. Why are they stepping outside of their values? They could be in this space, right? Where they're really trying to figure out, or maybe they're even trying to please their boss, right? So trying to get that happiness there or seeking there or wanting there. Maybe they're up for promotion. Maybe maybe they think it's going to make you happy that they're doing it. There's many, many different reasons on why. But if it's not aligned with their values, or maybe you're making decisions that's not aligned with your values, ask yourself, are you on this hedonic treadmill? And do you need to go?
And I think that even goes back to, right, when we talk about food safety culture and organizations often like to lead with, here are our values and you all will live them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? If my personal values, it doesn't mean that my personal values aren't perhaps part of that, but that intersection of where my values tie in with the organization is the sweet spot.
Yes.
That is the space that as leaders we need to find with team members and those we work with. Because just saying, well, our company values collaboration, so you should do it, like that is not a driver for me.
Right.
But if I can find that, like my need for achievement and your need for contribution, like we can make those work together. Now, like regardless of what our company value is, we can make progress together.
Yes. Yes.
I love
you.
that because it takes work.
Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. It's not easy, right? Like these things that we're talking about today, it's not easy. And if we take the easy route, we're going to be stuck in this hedonic treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we understand what it is, right? We've given examples of how it shows up. Like, what do I need to do? What are those action steps people need to take to escape from this cycle?
Well, we kind of jumped in with the values.
Yeah.
Right? Like making decisions that align with values,
Mm-hmm.
your values.
Yeah.
Not making decisions that align with Tia's values or this person's values, or even, dare I say, my organizational values.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's something for a consideration, but I have to find this mesh point.
Right, exactly. You have to do the work around yourself, right? Like you have to become more aware of what your values are, so you can even start having conversations about your organizational values, right? And team values is one of the things that we talk about as we help organizations with food safety culture, right? Like values and beliefs, that is the first step to understand. And you're looking at yourself is the first step, right? Of understanding values and how to live those every day.
Yeah. I think especially as leaders, what we can do when we think about hedonic treadmill is remember, going back to Oprah, people need to be seen, heard, and know they matter.
Yes.
Right? If we're constantly on that treadmill of like, do you see me? Yay, you saw me. And then I come back down. Did you hear me? And I come back down.
Yes.
But when we keep repeating that over and over, right, that helps raise the baseline.
Yeah, it does.
But when we don't do it, it lowers the baseline.
Right. Yeah. And we hadn't talked about that much, but yeah, like the baseline is not staying, right? So it's like, it's
not hardwired.
Right. Exactly. So it just depends on what direction you're working ongoing. And if it's like lack of action, right? Inaction is lowering that baseline.
Yeah.
Action is helping, the right actions, I should say, is raising that baseline. So yeah, this whole idea, it's like, I feel like this sentence, this quote from Oprah is like screams culture. It's like, it's one of those things, like, if you want, what is culture at its baseline is really people want to be seen, heard, and know they matter.
Yeah.
That's what culture is. And if that's not a part of your leadership in your organization, you're missing out on culture.
Mm-hmm. And I know, Tia, in our feedback module in boot camp, I think you had put a statistic in there, something like people need, was it 13?
Oh yeah.
13 positive feedbacks, compared to one negative. And that kind of goes to this hedonic treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's this thought that younger generations, gosh, they need so much positive feedback all the time. Well, guess what? That's because we're on this hedonic treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
And the more they're looking, how do we raise our baselines?
Yes.
Where before, we know from how people's needs are changing from that report, the old school loyalty club, like, I just need a job. No news is good news.
Yes.
Like, we weren't interested in where the baseline was. It was survival. And so we're talking about how do we create cultures where we're helping people be at the baselines they want to be and also raising those.
Yeah. And before you're thinking out there, like, this generation, right? Like, I love it. One time, I can't remember where we were, but we were having conversations around generations. And you said, the new generations are coming in because of us. And the way that they think about work, the way that they think about happiness, right? The way that they think about feedback, it's all been taught by their parents, right? By the older generations, where they have been on this treadmill. And they have said in their later years that if I could start back over, right, my baseline would be a little higher. Yes. Right? I would do these things to get out of that cycle. And the later generations have heard that. And they have said, you know what, I'm not going to accept the baseline that my parents accepted, right? Because they told me not to. They told me that there's something better out there. And so now there's a little bit higher. So us as leaders, right, that, have been leading and are now leading people coming into the organization, we have to make that shift.
We do. And I think that flows great into one of the other things we need to do around hedonic treadmill is really focus on people development plans.
Yes. We kind of hit on it a little bit earlier where, people need to have the right competencies, the right skills to be able to lead. Yes. Otherwise, right, that the actions that we take is not going to move us forward. And it's not going to help us escape. It might even speed up the treadmill a little bit.
It might. And I think even when we think about, as leaders, the development plans that we have for our team members, maybe they're not ready for a formal leadership role yet, but our stance on this, everybody's a leader.
Yes.
And so what are the development plans for everyone, not just the high performers, not just the senior people, but everyone is looking at how do they raise the bar on happiness? Because, right, the base in organizations is large. And when we think about culture, if we raise that up a little bit, we get way more return than if we raise one or two people up a little.
Right. Yeah. And you really do want your whole organization to really be thinking about how they can, in what areas they need to be developed, how they're going to get the development right, and then supporting them getting the development, because that only moves your organization forward. Yep. Like you said, if you just have a few of the top people kind of developing and lead, like they're moving on leading, but they're trying to lead a group that does not have those skills, that is not ready for the next step. So it doesn't make sense in an organization that your senior leaders are getting this development and feeling all great in their role when the people that are executing, or the middle managers that's helping to, advance culture forward, if they don't have those skills, then really we're not moving forward.
No. So I think that's, one of the key pieces of making sure that we understand what that is. And it's, what are the things for people to have success in their roles?
Yeah.
It's not even about, I'm going to prepare you for the next role. That's great if that's the path. But sometimes it's like, where are we at and what helps us be really successful here? Not
Yeah.
everybody's looking to get promoted or move, or not maybe the way that you think they are. So
Mhm.
that is a really critical part.
Yes. Yes. You know, another thing that you could do is incorporate, and we highly suggest this, incorporating rituals into your teams,
Mm-hmm.
right? Into your environment, right? Into what you do with your staff, or to, if you work in a plant, right? To the team members that's working in operations. What are those rituals that you do?
Mm-hmm. The ones that help people feel like they belong,
Yeah.
to feel like the things they do matter,
Yes.
to feel like we're part of the greater good in what we're doing.
Yes. And we call it a ritual because you're doing it often.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things. So like if you have a ritual where you show appreciation, right? And maybe it's appreciation where you're having conversations with people on the floor. If you did that once, right? Again, it's that happiness and then you're back down to baseline.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a ritual, you're doing it often. You might do it every Monday, or you might do it every other day, or whatever it is with your ritual. It might be every day, right? Whatever your ritual is, you are continuously doing and reinforcing, right? These behaviors, or whatever it is, right? That you have your ritual around. You're reinforcing that and those good feelings so that you can raise that bar.
Yeah. And I know some people are like, well, gosh, how much do we have to do? Do we have to celebrate everything? And the answer is, well, no. But spreading good feelings and happiness all around, is that a bad thing?
Right, right. And when we think about culture, right, it definitely helps.
Yeah. And you know what? It doesn't mean go do all of it, but start picking the things that matter to people, right? Ask them like, hey, what would matter here? Or if something went away, like if this activity we do went away, would you care? And if they're like, no, clearly not an important ritual.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So those are things that you can even ask people about, or start trying things together and getting them involved. Because once again, collectively, if we're all coming up on the treadmill or the breezing the baseline, it
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah. I agree. I love it too. The point of like asking, right? Like what's working, what's not working. It's not all on you. It's how you serving people. So knowing what it means to serve people, asking them, right, is a key part of it.
Yeah. And of course, I love the last one,
Yeah.
reflection and gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know,
If you're looking for happiness out here, even if it's with rituals or development plans, like
yeah.
some of that, right, translates back and forth, but it's got to start here in our hearts.
Yeah, it does. And as you think about this, this cycle or this treadmill, right? Like if you're not reflecting on where you are today and how far you've come, it feels like you have made no progress, which means that you are on this treadmill, right? But when you can reflect and say, wow, last year, this is what we were doing and we made some progress. It's like you're acknowledging that the baseline has changed and everyone's there,
Yeah.
right? And it kind of puts some words or some feelings or some graphics, however you want to reflect and share. Like it's kind of it's like putting out in the universe, right? It's almost like one of those things where you're acknowledging it and you're saying, okay, our baseline has changed. We're not where we used to be. We've actually made some major improvements, right? So we can start down the next path and not be in this cycle and continue to again reflect and then show gratitude for the people that has helped move this baseline. Because again, it takes work to do it.
It does. And of course, it's seeing it is harder than the little moments of the dopamine hits.
Yeah.
Those are the obvious things. So when the baseline shifts a little, we don't always notice.
Yeah.
Today I was on a call with one of our rock star clients
Yeah.
who they're moving into a new role and they're like, oh, what do I need to be doing? And we're like, well, let's think back to when you moved into this role. What were your thoughts going in? And what did you learn and where are you at today that carries you to the next role?
Yes. Yes.
Right. And really, when we went through this exercise, they were like, yep, I was very intentional in how I wanted to do this in this movie. And so even though I have some of these new these return feelings of gosh, the uncertainty of a new role and the excitement of a new role and some of that anxiety, but yet, right, this gratitude and this reflection of like the progress that has happened.
Yeah.
And once again, I mean, not something that started a month ago. This
Right.
is like years in the making. And I think when we talk about culture, our organizations are so focused on short-term results, quarterly profits, quarterly numbers, annual KPIs, right? Culture is not going to fit into that bucket,
It's not.
especially if we're measuring at this high level.
Right.
And so I think that's another reason why we always, one of my pet peeves is the measuring up here, but forgetting that the things down here, what we actually want to see moving.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we really need to think, what are those things that we can look at to measure to see that shift so we can really be grateful for it, and we can, really appreciate what we've done and how we've contributed and where we're at now too.
Yes. Yes. And allows you to even think about like what's to come. And like, like I think about that as you talk about the KPIs, because a lot of times people are, like you said, they're trying to fit culture into what we've always done. But it doesn't fit. And you should see your KPIs change for culture over time, because depending on where you are, right, like that baseline again changes. What you're working on changes around culture. And if you're not really reflecting and showing this gratitude around how far you've come and who has helped along the way, then that's when you start doing actions, right, that might not help raise the baseline.
Right. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So what an interesting topic of how it shows up for us personally, how it shows up professionally, for our teams, for our organizational culture.
Yes, yes. It's really interesting to think about. So even as you're thinking about, okay, what can I do? We talked about 5 really, really good ones, right? Going back to your values and really understanding what's important. That's number 1. Number 2, making sure that people, feel seen, heard, and know that they matter.
Yes.
Figuring out what that is and taking actions towards that. I wholeheartily believe that is like culture in a sentence.
It is.
Yeah. Like if they don't feel seen, heard, and know that they matter, culture stops, right? Like
Oprah nailed it on that one.
Right. Number 3 was development plans, making sure that people are continuously growing, right? And continually raising that bar. If you only have development plans for your top performers or the senior leaders in the organization, maybe this is your action step. Maybe this is the light bulb to say, okay, we need to think about how does everyone in the organization have a development plan and start thinking about what competencies they need to lead in the future.
Yeah, and I'm going to add, how is it a mandatory requirement to help them have success in their role? Not just a nice to have. Like, no, this is a mandatory part of what we do. For those organizations that are all about, we're innovative and we're always on continuous improvement. Well, if you don't have development plans, I don't believe you.
Ooh, yes.
Anyways.
So true. So this is that real talk. So true. Number 4 was rituals. Think about how are you incorporating rituals into what you do, and how are you reinforcing, right? Reinforcing where you are and keep those good feelings rolling.
Yes.
And then number 5, practicing reflection and gratitude, right? How are you reflecting on where you are today, how far you've come, and then acknowledging and being grateful that what you have is enough for where you are.
Whew. Love them. And if you're thinking, yep, that would be great. It would be good for me to reflect and have some gratitude on where we're at. It would be great to think about, how do I start incorporating some of these things? Or maybe there's some other things that are on, top of mind for you. Then I'm going to invite you to join our vision board workshop.
Yes.
It's January 10th.
Yes.
And it's going to be during this real talk time, but it's going to be workshop style. So it's going to be in Zoom and we're going to be doing stuff. Because it is all about really getting creative and hands-on, and really using this visual channel that we have to create what we want to see in 2024.
Yes.
So I'm going to drop that link in our real talk after the show, but join us.
Yes. Maybe this is the first action you need to take to get off of your hedonic treadmill.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of HGTV, there's a reason why those designers always have those boards with like the paint color and the fabric and the woodwork. It's because they're crafting and creating what they want to see in that space.
Yes.
That's what we're doing on the vision board. We're crafting and creating what you want to see in your life, whether it's personal, professional, or both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so excited about that. I'm also excited about seeing your faces and being able to interact. So we love doing these type of workshops, and we're excited to see you on the 10th.
Yes, January 10th. So, and as we wrap up next week, we're actually going to be with QA Magazine for their virtual food safety culture, I guess, conference, webinar, workshop.
Conference.
That is going to be next week, somewhat during this time that we would have Real Talk. So we also are going to invite you to join us there. Yes. Frankie Giannis is there, Matthew Ragusky, and us, and there will be some others as well.
Yes.
But we would love to have you join us there, and we're going to get another perspective and dive into food safety culture through some different lenses.
Yes. So please join us at that virtual conference. It's going to be amazing. Last year was amazing. Just hearing people talk about food safety culture. And it's almost like this time of the year. I like it here because we're going through that reflection, right? Gratitude and thinking about, right? Like what's next. Mm-hmm. Join us there. Let's have some conversations and bring all of that goodness to our vision board workshop on January.
Yes. So I'll put both of those links in the comments for everybody to grab and register and be able to join us. So,
all right. Well, we will see you all next week at the QA Magazine Food Safety Culture virtual conference that they have. And then it's same time, right? It's around this time. We'll make sure to that link. And then, as always, reach out to us if you need anything from us. We love doing Real Talk. We hope that you are having a happy holidays, and we will see you all soon.
Yes, we will. Thanks for joining us.
Bye. Bye-bye.